So women's self-defense. I got bad news for most of you. 90% of women's self-defense is complete and utter bullshit. It just is. If you watch these classes or attend these classes, what you'll see is that the majority of the class is focused around teaching some form of kickboxing, dirty street tactics, or fight tactics, or techniques, whatever you want to call it, like eye gouging, scratching, kicking people in the balls, all sorts of silly shit like that. Very cringy grip break techniques, as if some guys are going to walk up to you, grab your shirt, and just stand there and do nothing. Stuff like that. And this does a great disservice to women, and quite frankly, it's a tragedy because at best, the women who attend these courses and these classes, at best, is just a waste of their time and money. At worst, it gives them a false sense of ability and security. So it really is a travesty that a lot of these classes, or at least the majority of what's taught in these classes, is complete lunacy. The entire idea that you're going to teach your average woman in a 4, 6, or 8 hour course or class or seminar, whatever you want to call it, how to kickbox her way out of a violent encounter with a man is completely ludicrous. It's delusional at best. Here's the reality. The average woman cannot hit the average man hard enough to do any sort of real physical harm to him. Quite frankly, the average woman can't even hit the average man probably hard enough to even faze him. That's just the truth. That's just the reality. Call me sexist, call me whatever the fuck you want, but that is the reality of it. So now I can already hear some retard in the comments section, typing away, going, well, what about Ronda Rousey? What about Ronda Rousey? Ronda Rousey, you kick the shit out of any man. And the funny thing is, Ronda Rousey proves my point. In order to find a woman that would have any sort of chance at beating up a guy barehanded, the average guy barehanded, you have to go out and find not only a athletic freak of a woman, because Ronda Rousey is an athletic freak in terms of like the female bell curve of athleticism. She's more masculine than she is feminine, just again due to the bell curve, right? Just because of her athleticism. But on top of that, she's an extremely athletic woman who has dedicated her life to mixed martial arts and fighting. That's her entire life. That's what she does full-time, day in and day out. So in order to find a woman that has a chance of beating up the average man, you have to go and pick an athletic freak who has dedicated her life to fighting and is arguably the best, if not just one of the best, female fighters in the world. Could Ronda Rousey kick the shit out of the average male? Probably. But the funny thing is, if you stuck Ronda Rousey into a ring with even the shittiest male UFC fighter you could find, that male UFC fighter would wipe the floor with Ronda Rousey. It's just the way it is. I'm sorry, there is a gigantic disparity of force between men and women. Again, call me sexist, call me whatever you want, but that's just reality, and to deny that is at your own peril. So with all that being said, what should women do for self-defense? To better prepare themselves to defend themselves, primarily against an aggressive male who actually truly intends to do her harm? Well, I have a few suggestions. Number one, in terms of like empty hand martial arts, if you will, I would highly suggest she goes out and learns Jiu-Jitsu. Now, I want to put a gigantic caveat on this. I am not saying a woman should go out and learn Jiu-Jitsu for the context of self-defense, that is. So that way she can take a man to the ground and try to submit him, choke him out, armbar him, or whatever. I am not saying that whatsoever. I think within the context of self-defense, women should go out and learn jiu-jitsu, so that way, in the event that they get taken to the ground, they have a better chance and they have a much better ability to either A, get themselves off the ground and get back to their feet, ideally, or at the very least, get themselves in a better position on the ground to better be able to deploy weapons. So for example, if a woman is walking down a parking lot or in a parking garage and some dude sprints out between two cars and tackles her ass to the ground, if she is knowledgeable in jiu-jitsu and well-practiced in jiu-jitsu, she is going to have a significantly better chance of escaping that ground entanglement, i.e. getting out of that position and getting back to her feet, ideally, or at the very least, getting to a better position on the ground to better deploy a weapon. Her chances of that, if she knows jiu-jitsu, go up significantly. Going further from jiu-jitsu, I think women's self-defense should be heavily weapons-based, because a weapon, particularly a blade or a firearm, is going to equal the playing field quite a bit in terms of the disparity of force between a man and a woman. So I've already said that the average woman cannot hit the average man hard enough to do really any major physical harm or, quite frankly, even faze him. However, if you put one of these in her hand, right, this is a El Nino from Shivworks, by the way, so shout out to Craig and Brian, all of a sudden, that punch that otherwise wouldn't do shit to that guy, especially a guy who is extremely aggressive and is actually intending to do her harm, suddenly that punch now becomes an extremely, something that can do extreme bodily harm, if not death. So this changes the game significantly for her. So now that punch that otherwise wouldn't do anything now is going to cause extreme harm. And on top of that, if she disengages the clinch or gets us out prior to a clinch or whatever, this is a lot more of a psychological deterrent than just her being like this. I'm sorry, for a guy who, especially a guy who's significantly larger than a woman, but quite frankly, if a guy is intending to do a woman harm and she puts her hands up like this, it's not going to deter him one bit. However, if she has this in her hand, suddenly this becomes a massive deterrent. And on top of that, especially with these push dagger type blades, this requires very little skill to use. You punch at him and you keep punching at him, primarily towards his face, chest, or any other target of opportunity he gives you, especially if you're within a clinch, right? And you just keep punching. And again, you don't really have to train anybody with this. I could put this in the hands of a 5-year-old and he could do some pretty serious damage to somebody with this. So relatively easy to use, extremely lethal, and definitely helps even the playing field between a man and a woman. That's for sure. Moving on from there, of course, firearms are another phenomenal option, of course, for women. I mean, women should, if they're willing to, definitely get training and carry a firearm, because this is even better in a blade in a lot of circumstances. Maybe not within the context of a clinch, of course. However, a firearm is definitely a good deterrent, because no longer can she just do damage within hand's reach. This allows her to reach out and keep people away from her. So different tools for different purposes, of course. If she's willing to carry both, phenomenal. Hopefully she is willing to carry both, because it gives her options, a lot more options. But regardless, firearms and blades are a woman's best friend when it comes to self-defense against a man.